It's my privilege as President of the Council of this Institute to express a very warm welcome to all of you here today for the official opening of the F. Groves building. We are delighted to have with us members of Parliament and members of our own city and neighbouring municipalities, and I would like to express a welcome to the Mayor of the City of Caulfield, Councillor Geoffrey Patience, to the Mayor of the City of Malvern, Councillor Julius Pollock, and to Councillor Meldrum representing the City of Melbourne. To our Members of Parliament, the Honourable Charles Hyder, MLA Member for Monash, Mr R.H. Suggett, MLA, the Member for Bentley, and I also have to officially welcome back our old friend Mr Hartley Halstead, who is Vice President of the Victorian Institute of Colleges and of course past Director of this Institute. We are also honoured to have with us 4 of the children of the late Mr Frank Groves through the very close cooperation we have had with Mrs Bannerman, his daughter. We have 12 grandchildren of the late Mr Groves, and I can't count the number of great-grandchildren, but we have a very large representation of the family of the late Mr Groves. I have official apologies for you from the Minister for Education, the Honourable Lindsay Thompson, from Mr J.A. Rafferty MP, who is represented here by Mr Rees MLA, and from the Honourable Charles Francis MLA, Member for Caulfield, from Mr Roger Shipton, the Member for Higgins, and Mr Ian McPhee, the Member for Balaclava, and Mr A. Staley, MHR. We hope that Sir Willis Connolly, President of the Victorian Institute of Colleges, will be with us later, so we're not really tendering an apology for him at this stage. Some short time ago, at the opening of the K.H. Boycott building, I had occasion to request the former Prime Minister for some extra federal funding for this college to assist us in the establishment of our own permanent art collection. And I suggested that he might give us a small contribution from his Blue Poles collection. Little did I know that within such a short time this college, on its own initiative, would have produced its own work of art of blue poles. However, the credit for this imposing facade behind us must go to the consulting architects, Messrs Perrott, Lyon and Matheson, and not to Jackson Pollock. The credits on your official programme show you the people to whom we are indebted for the building, the architects, the other consultants and the builder. The best I can say to them is that their work is seen here in the monument behind us. We are deeply grateful to all concerned in the building of this building. It's one of the few major buildings built in Melbourne that was finished before the contract time, and that's a great credit to the architect and to all those who've been involved. Times have changed over the last 50 years, and with these times our attitudes have changed. They're becoming more realistic since we as Australians are more capable of looking at ourselves and our society objectively. In 1920 there appeared an advertisement in the news, and it was from this technical school, and it invited applications from youths desirous of learning the trade of farriers, wheelwrights and wagon builders at evening classes. And I'm surprised that the student union of that day didn't condemn that as a sexist advertisement. Your Excellency, over a long period you have been exhorting us to look at our own situation, to ensure that our lifestyle is fashioned for the needs of this community and not for the needs of other societies which have proved inadequate, inefficient or unsuitable. You called for a new look at the Constitution to meet present realities. You suggested a council to advise not only on a national economic plan, but also to give Australians in government and in the homes an awareness of the more discriminating expectations and the more relevant dissatisfactions which should influence our national life. Some 20 years ago at a political science summer school in Canberra, you used these words, sir. Are the achievements of our society to be measured by the standards of conspicuous consumption? Are the goals of Australian achievement to be the white wall tyres, the Jagalaks, the private swimming pools and boats, the ever more elaborate winter pilgrimages to the north, and ultimate cultural glory, the colour television? You warned us of the dangers implicit in a total dedication to such goals. You will also probably recall, sir, in 1963 when you addressed the annual conference of the Victorian High Schools Headmasters Association, it was your belief that Australian education relied too much on syllabus and examination, that education in Australia had little relevance to the Australian scene and culture, and mainly imitated overseas methods. You believed that Australian teachers were inclined away from developing individuality in pupils, and that they contented themselves with finding out what a student knew about a subject rather than seeking what a student felt about it. In 1968, you were again warning us to be aware of complacency, or as you termed it, the she'll be right attitude. When you delivered the report on the Duke of Edinburgh's third study conference, you indicated that the commission set up on education and training was concerned with uneven educational opportunities at different levels, the communication gap between parents and students, and particularly at the tertiary level, the failure rates and the attendant waste and sense of frustration and failure. The Commission found widespread evidence of an orientation of education towards training for the rat race and too little concern for the development of the whole person. There was need for first-rate vocational guidance to harness more efficiently the manpower resources of Australia. The then provision of vocational training was described as too little and too late. There was also criticism of industry's lack of interest in training of technicians and technologists, that students were being trained for jobs which would not be there and would be unprepared for the requirements of the future. The Commission identified the urgent problem of adult retraining and found that insufficient use was being made of good management courses. Your Excellency, we at this college have heeded your remarks in these areas, and we are developing an institute which is in fact a multi-level, multidiscipline campus. I'm sure that you will have seen today from your inspection of our resources and from your conversations with members of staff and the students that the Institute is aware of the individual and is committed to the total development of the individual person in the sphere of post-secondary education. We accept change, we acknowledge different attitudes come with change, and we are presently looking at our future rather than our past, so that both technical and further education and advanced education will continue side by side at this institute with their separate identities preserved. We are looking at areas of excellence, equality of courses, equality of opportunity, and we will develop a strategy and implement a structure that will identify these areas. It's our desire that the decision-making process, the management quality, the lines of communication, and the staff conditions will be such that all persons in our college community will be totally involved. The Institute will continue to cooperate with other colleges, institutions and teaching bodies, and will look to rationalisation of its resources and accept its obligation to the wider community in which we live. Your Excellencies, it is a particular honour and privilege for me as President of the Council of this college to extend to you both a very warm and sincere welcome to this campus. It is the occasion of your first official visit. You are both well known within our city, and it's fitting that you are with us today to formally open the F. Groves building. It's always, of course, with a sense of wonder and envy that I read your long list of academic and other qualifications and the numerous public and private appointments during your career. Perhaps as an inspiration to the members of staff and the students present, may I disclose, sir, that you, Your Excellency, in 1935 at Scotch College won 5 first-class honours, and at Melbourne University subsequently won exhibitions in every subject of your law degree. You were appointed tutor in political philosophy at the age of 19 years, and then lecturer in the Extension Department at Melbourne University, making you one of the youngest university lecturers in the world. You're a Victorian Rhodes Scholar for 1941, and in 1945 acting lecturer in law at the University of Melbourne before being appointed lecturer in law at Oriel College, Oxford. In 1951, you were appointed Dean of the Faculty of Law and Professor of Public Law at the University of Melbourne, and subsequently accepted an appointment as Vice-Chancellor of the University of New England, New South Wales, and then Vice-Chancellor of the University of Queensland in Brisbane. His Excellency has been a visiting professor at the universities of Chicago, Utah, Illinois, Washington, Harvard and Calcutta. He holds honorary degrees from the universities of Hong Kong, Queensland and Melbourne. He's been president of the Adult Education Association of Australia, the Australian Institute of Urban Studies, and he was academic governor of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and a member of the Council of the University of Lesotho. While at the University of Melbourne, His Excellency was much in demand as an after-dinner speaker. And now as Governor-General, I find him very much in demand as an after-luncheon speaker. I propose to ask His Excellency to address us and to officially open the F. Groves building. And at the conclusion of His Excellency's remarks, there will be a slight variation to the order on your programme, and that at the conclusion of His Excellency's remarks, there will be followed a short recital by the brass ensemble of the College of the Arts, which you see on my right. It's my great pleasure, Sir Zelman, to ask you to address us and to officially open this building.
Mr. President and members of the Council, Mr. Director, members of the Parliament, your worships, the mayors, members of local authorities, members of the Groves family, many distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I say, sir, how grateful I am for that comprehensive reminder of a variety of speeches and activities. Listening as I did to that statement complaining about people who went up to the north, I recollected that I really fell into the trap myself, because I made that journey and stayed there for 8 very happy years. So whatever was wrong in the society of those times, the notion of going to the north wasn't wrong. But may I say how grateful I am for all your very generous words, and what you said brought back memories of good times past, and we shared experience together, the President and I, at an earlier time. I think you'll know from, perhaps those of you who didn't know will know from what was said, that I'm no stranger to places of education, and that I've spent my life up to my present appointment in places of education. In fact, my life has been spent in universities, at home and abroad, as a teacher administrator, and from 1967 until 1977 as Vice-Chancellor in 2 universities. I think I was the first person in Australia to serve successively as Vice-Chancellor of 2 Australian universities, one comparatively small, one very large. Indeed, I was at the time of my resignation as Vice-Chancellor of the University of Queensland the longest serving person serving as a Vice-Chancellor in Australia, though not by much. And I was also at that time Chairman of the Australian Vice-Chancellors Committee, though within days after my appointment to my present office was announced, I resigned that office. I think it's clear that the man who holds that office mustn't be encumbered with other obligations. He must wage his battles without the complications of other office. I think I can say that I've lived in changing climates, and I don't mean physical climates, I mean climates of attitude and opinion, changing attitudes to education, and particularly changing attitudes to tertiary or post-secondary education. I'm reminded of the words of a famous American figure in university education in particular, but education generally, Clark Kerr, who said that in the days of high favour, the university was seen as the secular cathedral of our times. But as the economic winds blew colder, attitudes changed. Seldom, said Kerr, had so great an American institution passed so quickly from its golden age to its age of survival. Of course, the blessings of support for education were more copious in the United States than here, though there was here the promise and indeed the reality of fulfillment. With the Martin Report in the early 1960s, there came the promises of the colleges, and the evidence of that you see here today. And much more recently, with Kangan, the much-needed development of technical and further education. And then the cold winds which were recorded in the United States by Kerr and others, and in England in reports and statements early in the 1970s, came to us later. I say later because if you look back as recently as 1973, there was recommendations for the expansion of medical education. Not long after that, reports advocating and supporting the expansion of external studies, and much talk about the development of new institutions. Indeed, early in 1975, we were still talking and planning expansively. In those days, in those years, universities had expanded in numbers and in activities. The colleges had multiplied in numbers and in activities, and they had developed greatly. And TAFE, technical and further education, was seen as an area of significant and necessary development. To be sure, throughout all these years, questions were being asked about the role, about coordination, about direction, about misdirection, about duplication. But then the winds blew colder, there came the freeze very quickly, and then a new coordination in the tertiary or post-secondary area with the new commission, and the announcement of a special emphasis on technical and further education in the post-secondary sector. And all of this, as you well know, has been associated with a questioning about the directions of educational policy, not only within the tertiary sector, though in the post-war period, here as in many other parts of the world, the tertiary, the post-secondary sector, was specially favoured. And the questioning that I'm trying to speak about has been expressed at governmental level, state and federal, in an extensive range of inquiries, state and federal, specific and general. The Williams Committee of Inquiry into Education and Training was appointed in 1976, and we expect to see its report within the course of the next day or two when it is tabled in the Parliament. Then, only a short time ago, issues relating to education were discussed here on the Conference on Structural Change in Employment. I say here, I mean held in Melbourne in December 1978, at which Professor Peter Carmel, chairman of the Tertiary Education Commission, presented a substantial, a thoughtful, and an important paper. Well, I say all this because this is the climate in which we meet here today. In somewhat difficult and uncertain times, with a real concern for employment and with a real concern about the massive growth in educational expenditures, both governments and the community generally are asking a number of hard questions. Governing bodies and staff associations in institutions may be very unhappy and may protest about frozen and curtailed budgets, and they may appropriately point to the consequences, but the community is not necessarily and not easily persuaded. I think that accountability is given a much sharper definition than when I first spoke and wrote about it in the educational context some years ago. May I also say this, that in the course of this last year, I have learned a good deal. And I've learned a good deal about education and educational institutions, which I knew imperfectly before that. whereas earlier my life was spent principally in universities. In the course of this last year, I've gone to colleges and I've gone to TAFE institutions, and in the course of this year, the course of this present year, I shall be going to many tertiary institutions of various descriptions in city and in country areas. And I want to say that this is very important for my own education, for my own understanding, and for the expansion of my own horizons. And I'm very pleased to come to Caulfield, and which happens to be the second institution to which I've come this year, though only by a few days. Last week I had the great pleasure to be at the graduation of the National Television and Film School, which is doing such excellent work in this country. And I've been supplied with a variety of reports and publications about Caulfield. And they've set out developments and programs and issues very well. I want to say, Mr. President and Mr. Director, that one such document puzzled me a little. What appears to be the last item in a recent staff newsletter reporting the council meeting of the 5th of October 1978. And may I say that it contains a number of items which show that councils all over don't really deal with very different matters, is the following, and I can vouch for it. It's at the end of the report of this meeting of the 5th of October 1978. The following words: wanted, bitch wants good home, contact extension 321. Now, on reflection, that doesn't seem to me to be a usual council item, or if it is, it says something in rather concealed language. But I suspect it got into the wrong place. The last report available to me for the college is for 1977. And that 1977 report reported progress, excellent progress on Project C, the formal opening of which brings us here today. And it deals with a variety of interesting matters. And the Deputy Director has supplied me with a very interesting and a capable statement which emphasizes and sets out the thrust of the Institute's work and its distinctive character, if I may presume to say so, very well and very concisely. He points out what has come to me clearly through a study of the material and through what I've seen today, that the Institute has sought to operate as a genuine polytechnic, offering a range of levels of courses encompassing pre-apprenticeship through to postgraduate, diploma and master's courses in a number of applied disciplines, believing that this best serves the continuing needs of its students, many of whom are part-time and of mature age. May I say, if I may, that I have a great deal of sympathy with this, and I was particularly interested to read the account of the TAFE, the Technical and Further Education Operations. And I was impressed to read and today to see, although to be sure it was on the television screen, something of the TAFE School of Orientation Studies. Having recently seen something of the Galbally Report recommendations on migrant education and the draft discussion paper on education in a multicultural Australia, I was interested to ask about what was being done in respect of migrant education, and what I was told then was of very real interest to me. As a lawyer educator for so long, I was, I think, reasonably well equipped to understand the Deputy Director's comments on the solution of difficult problems of coordinating funding and course accreditation of different authorities, and about what he described, and I quote his words, as the ubiquitous complexities of our federal system of government as applied to education. They're his words. In the reports and in the most recent statement of activities made available to me, I've read with great interest the various programs that you've developed. I understand now, as I understand from my recent experience, the complexities of program which such an institute as this undertakes, and the response to a wide range of community needs. I shan't instance particular programs because they're well known to you, and I'm in the position of the learner. And I'm glad that I know a good deal that I did not know only a short time ago. Of course, I don't know the practice, and I welcome the opportunity to see and learn what I can on visits such as this. Well, building programs have necessarily gone on more slowly than at an earlier time. I see that your last major building was the Philip Law building in 1976, and I'm pleased that it bears his name. He and I are old friends of long standing, and I admire the energy and the driving purpose and the idealism which has been at the very center of his life. Today, Project C is launched as the F. Groves building. Something is set out about Mr. Groves in the program, and I'll speak only briefly. It's clear that he lived a long and a fruitful life. He served the community in local and in state government. He was a minister of the state. He showed a long-standing interest in education, and he played an important role in the establishment of the Caulfield Technical School, which, as you said, Mr. President, was established to meet a need to train people and, in its particular context, servicemen returned from World War I. Classes began in 1922 with the first principal, a blacksmith, and the original studies were trade-oriented. There was a decline during the Depression years, and in the years after World War II, there was renewed growth and expansion when the school once again served the educational and training needs of ex-servicemen. In 1958, the school became the Caulfield Technical College, and Mr. Groves served on the council until his death in 1959. Later, in 1965, the college was affiliated with the Victorian Institute of Colleges. In 1968, its name was changed to the Caulfield Institute of Technology, and it became an autonomous educational institution. It's a pleasure to see members of Mr. Groves' family here today, and even though I don't have personal knowledge, it's very clear that Mr. Groves served the Institute long and well for many years, though he did not live to see it bear the name of Institute. And I think that it's fitting that this building, which will accommodate the School of Business, sections of the Department of Art and Design, and various support services, should bear his name. It takes its place as the third main building provided by Commonwealth funding in recent years. So I come to a conclusion. I say it is a great pleasure to be here and to be charged with the responsibility of declaring the F.J. Groves building formally open. I congratulate all of those who've been associated with it. I congratulate the President and the members of the Council, members of the staff, and the student body upon the event, which marks an important milestone in the history of the Institute. I wish the Institute well in its many undertakings and in its community service, and I now declare this building open.
Your Excellencies, honoured guests, members of the Groves family, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we would all agree that the F. Groves building has now been well and truly opened, and I would start by asking you to join me in thanking His Excellency Sir Zelman Cowan for such an inspiring and thoughtful, understanding address to us today. Sir Zelman. I would like to thank Sir Zelman and Lady Cowan for visiting us here at CIT. They have had a chance to look around. They asked for a chance to look around, to see what we do, to see something of our work, to meet some of our students and staff, and we were delighted that they were able and prepared to give us that, show us that interest. Lady Cowan and Sir Zelman, thank you for coming. I'd like to thank the Victorian College of the Arts, Mr. John Hopkins, the Dean of Music, Mr. Paul Plunkett, the leader of the brass ensemble, and the players of the brass ensemble for coming here today to help us make this such an important and wonderful occasion. Thank you. I would like to give my personal thanks to Mr. Richard Snedden, the Deputy Director, who in fact has looked after all of the arrangements for today. Thank you, Richard. And I'd like to thank you all very much for coming. Now, before I invite you to join us for afternoon tea, I'd like to slip in one commercial. The students of this institute include some very fine artists in ceramics, and they have in fact some of their wares on sale in a shop right behind us here now, and I'm authorised to suggest that if any of you would like to browse there and perhaps buy some works, you will probably not be disappointed, and I'm sure they'll be delighted. Now, that is the end of the proceedings here, and if you'd like to move around now into the lobby of the Philip Law Building on this level, we hope you'll join us for afternoon tea. Thank you for coming.